tonight, Toronto and Peel urging the province to keep restrictions in place for longer.
The news coming from the medical health officers is disappointing. It's concerning.
Toronto and Peel's top doctors want the province to keep their regions in full lockdown until at least March instead of loosening restrictions next week. How residents and businesses feel about it. And
it's like listening to nails on a chalkboard, listening to you.
Premier Ford coming under fire for that remark while responding to opposition leader Andrea Horwath in the Ontario legislature. The fallout and Horwath's response. Plus, just as we finish digging ourselves out from one winter storm, another is on the way. When we can expect it to arrive and how much snow are we going to get this time? Good evening, I'm Kelda Yoon. Toronto and Peel's top public health officials are calling on the Ford government to delay the lifting of pandemic restrictions. The regions remain the province's most serious COVID-19 hotspots, and with the number of variant cases climbing, they say the loosening of rules too quickly will risk a potential third wave. Chris Glover reports.
Clusters of COVID variant cases are leading to a bold demand from Peel's medical officer.
I know it's not news that people want to hear, but I think just holding on for a couple more weeks will allow us to really figure out what the picture is.
The picture he has already is concerning. In just 7 days, variant cases in Peel have multiplied from 5 to 45, with an additional 200 suspected.
We have confirmed that the variants appear to be more transmissible, seemingly linked to much shorter interactions, as opposed to the typical close contact that is needed to transmit the original strain.
I have never been as worried about the future as I am today.
Toronto's top doctor calling for the same in a joint letter to the province, as 56 troubling variant cases have now been confirmed in the city. Another 283 cases are suspected.
By the time the confirmed case counts are big enough to shock us, it will be too late to do anything.
Here in Ontario, we're likely on the back end of wave 2.
On Twitter today, Michael Guerin Hospital's ICU director highlighted outbreak patterns linked to the B117 variant in other countries.
Let's hold the line. Let's wait a couple of weeks.
The province says Toronto, Peel, York, and North Bay's stay-at-home orders will remain until at least next Monday, and no decision on their future has been made yet.
We're watching those variants very, very carefully because they can take off and suddenly put an area into crisis.
Despite 258 confirmed variant cases in York, that region's top doctor wants out of lockdown and into the red control zone. Fewer confirmed cases of variants have been found in Toronto and Peel, and yet they're asking for an extension and you're not. I wonder if people are going to be able to wrap their heads around that.
We have been in the business of the variants, as it were, probably longer than any of the other health units.
He says his team has been studying the variants since first detected there in December.
With all those particular different ways of looking at the variants, we are not convinced that we are seeing any sort of explosive growth at this point.
Peel's top doctor says if any restrictions are lifted next week, paid sick leave better come with it.
Then I ask that we finally address the issues facing our essential workforce.
He says that balance must be struck to avoid a pending catastrophe. Chris Glover, CBC News, Toronto.
Meanwhile, Torontonians have mixed opinions when it comes to whether or not we're ready for the lockdown to be lifted. Business associations, though, are cautioning that many stores and restaurants won't be able to hold on much longer. Jessica Ng has more reaction.
On the streets of Toronto, opinions about the potential lifting of restrictions next week are mixed. Some are frustrated the city's top doctor is urging for the lockdown to stay in place longer.
But right now, because I feel very sick all the time faced on the computer, and right now I stay at home.
I feel like it is important to ask if the reaction to the virus is almost even worse than the virus itself. I know that sounds kind of radical, but I am starting to wonder that.
Others err on the side of caution.
I think we should be careful. So we've just opened the schools. So maybe we should leave that for 2 or 3 weeks, see what happens, and then start reopening other stuff.
I would hope that it would get opened up, but I really don't want to open up too fast and get put in another lockdown come spring.
Down to the experts, right? If they think it's not the right time, it's not the right time.
The
Though some Torontonians don't seem too bothered by the uncertainty of the pandemic, that's not the case for businesses. The Ontario Chamber of Commerce says their members haven't been able to open their doors for 220 days of the last year, and they say they're feeling the stress.
30,000 businesses in Ontario alone have gone bankrupt. We certainly expect more because people have taken on significant debt. Revenues have not been where they were before, and even the significant government assistance has not been sufficient for everyone.
Ryan Mallow of the Canadian Federation of Independent Business agrees.
In Toronto and Peel in particular, we're talking about businesses that have been shut down since November 23rd. There needs to be something that allows them to reopen to get just a trickle of business back in, because otherwise they're just not going to make it.
He adds 1 in 5 Ontario small business owners has refinanced a major asset, remortgaged a house, or sold a car during the pandemic just to cover off expenses.
They keep hearing, just wait a little bit longer. They can't wait a little bit longer.
Jessica Ng, CBC News, Toronto.
The Premier is facing some backlash tonight after an exchange he had with the leader of the opposition over lifting pandemic restrictions. Here's some of what happened.
When will the Premier actually start listening to the hospitals, to the doctors, to his own experts, and prevent this province from going into yet another third wave and lockdown?
Rather than just sit there and criticize and criticize. You know, it's like listening to nails on a chalkboard, listening to you.
That comment from the Premier drawing criticism from both the NDP and Liberals, some calling the remarks misogynistic and sexist. Speaking to reporters afterward, Horvath was asked if Ford owed her an apology.
I think he owes the people of Ontario an apology. I mean, this kind of behavior from a Premier is wholly inappropriate, and you know, and it's unfortunate that he doesn't see it that way.
When asked about the remarks, a spokesperson said the Premier condemns any and all forms of misogyny and sexism. We're learning the identity of the 14-year-old girl shot in the head last week near Jane and Finch. Speaking to CBC tonight, her father has confirmed her identity as Alyssa Driscoll. He describes his daughter as a warrior, telling us she is out of the ICU and making progress. She's able to talk and remember things, though her doctors say she still needs a lot of medical treatment and care. The family has set up a fundraising page to help cover her medical costs and any future treatment she may need. The shooting happened shortly before 3 a.m. last Friday in a building on Strong Court. Police are still looking for 4 men who were seen leaving the apartment and are asking them to turn themselves in. Halton police are investigating after 2 people were found dead following a fire in Georgetown. Emergency crews were called to a home on Hidden Lake Trail, about 60 kilometers from Toronto, around 5:30 this morning. The home was engulfed in flames. 2 people were found dead inside. The Office of the Ontario Fire Marshal has been called in to investigate. And in Toronto, investigators spent most of today at the scene of a fatal fire in Corktown. A wooden shelter at an encampment caught fire early this morning. A man was found dead inside. As Nick Boisvert reports, outreach workers say they have been fearing an incident like this since the pandemic began.
I saw the shelter in a ball of fire. Fire guys came out and put it out right away with the extinguishers and a hose.
Looking on from a construction site across the street, witnesses to this morning's fire describe a frantic rescue attempt.
Once they realized someone was in there, they went all out to crack that thing open like an egg.
Toronto firefighters have been busy on calls like this morning's for almost a year now. Encampments and parks across the city have steadily grown during the pandemic. Experts say the surge has been driven by job losses and fears of contracting the coronavirus in congregate shelters. But with more people living outside, the risk of fire has also grown. Last year, the city recorded 253 encampment fires. That's a 250% year-over-year increase. There have been another 27 so far this year.
People do not have anywhere to go. They are not safe in the shelters. There is no shelter for them on the streets. There's nowhere for them to get warm.
Outreach workers like Jen Evans say the winter has been especially brutal, with people doing what they can to avoid frostbite or freezing to death.
They're doing what you think they would do. They are using whatever means they have at their disposal to keep warm, and that often includes things that are flammable.
Investigators haven't yet determined the cause of this fire, but Toronto's fire department has repeatedly warned about the dangers of structures like these. The one that burned today was an enclosed wooden shelter, a little smaller than a shed.
You know, our message has been clear and will continue to be clear. This type of living arrangement outside is not safe.
The city says it is doing what it can to get people into regulated indoor shelters, but those sites are often at or near capacity already. Nick Boisvert, CBC News, Toronto.
Students in Peel returned to their classrooms this morning.
I'm really excited. You know, they get to go back to school, get to see all their friends, can see the teachers.
The first day back was supposed to be Tuesday. That, of course, was delayed by the heavy snowfall. Dropping off their kids this morning, some parents expressed concern the reopening is happening too soon.
I think it's a little too early, especially considering they are, we haven't even come out of the stay-at-home order in this region. So I don't understand how they could possibly reopen schools when we're supposed to stay at home.
The province has called for its larger school boards, such as Peel, to offer targeted COVID-19 testing in at least 5% of their elementary and secondary schools. Toronto officials say some of the variant cases in the city appear to be in the shelter system, with active cases seeing a sharp increase in the past week. Advocates for homeless people are especially concerned, saying there are many empty spaces that need to be opened up immediately to those who need it. Lorenda Redekop has more.
I do know that there are some screen-positive variant of concern cases within the context of our shelters here in the city.
No details, though, on how many of those 283 suspected variant cases are in the shelter system. But while provincial COVID cases are going down, cases in shelters are up from a week ago, with 115 active cases, up from 93. The biggest is the outbreak at Seton House, with 47 active cases and 1 person in a hospital.
We know that the homeless population is 5 times more likely to die from the virus than the non-homeless population. So I'm super worried about what this means for our most vulnerable people.
This outreach worker recently shot videos inside Union Station. Places for people to sit and warm up taken away or made off limits. She'd like the city to do something.
For right now, community centers are empty, office spaces are empty. All of those things can be opened up as temporary options for people to at least get to stay warm.
She's also spent hours on the phone to the city's intake system looking for a place for clients to sleep.
If you are looking for a shelter in the city of Toronto, press 3.
Something one of her colleagues demonstrated in a video he shot a few months ago. She says on the rare occasion there is space, it's communal shelters where people worry about the COVID risk and not the now preferred hotel spaces.
People are looking for spaces where they feel supported, where it's safe, where it's dignified. So some of the downtown hotel shelter spaces fill up so fast in the blink of an eye. So what we've been calling for is at least 2,000 more hotel shelter spaces in the downtown core.
A couple hundred more spaces are expected to be coming soon. This downtown hotel is supposed to open later this month as a temporary shelter site. Lorenda Redekop, CBC News, Toronto.
7-Eleven is applying for liquor licenses for 61 of its convenience store locations across the province, including 14 here in Toronto. The applications are for in-store consumption only. It's a move seen by some as the way the company is adapting to current times.
I will say it is a very novel approach, and I think it really illustrates the reality that a lot of small businesses are facing out there, where you have something like a convenience store, and in this case, a very large convenience store chain looking to adapt its business model coming out of the pandemic.
The company says to complement its pizza and fried chicken, it wants to serve drinks restaurant style inside the store in designated consumption areas. But some say there needs to be caution around this move. Organizations like Mothers Against Drunk Driving say they worry about drivers walking into a 7-Eleven to pay for gas and then having a drink while they're at it. After the break, reaction out of Regent Park as the federal government announces new legislation to tighten gun control.
For me, it was much easier to gain access to a firearm, drugs, rather than landing a job interview.
Why those who grew up in poverty are commending the move by the feds, but say it's just the start. Plus,
snow squall setting up for Thursday. I'm meteorologist Colette Kennedy. I'll tell you which communities most likely to be impacted coming up after the break.
welcome back. The federal government has tabled new firearms legislation as well as support for crime prevention and community safety. The rules are expected to make an impact in Toronto and address the city's issues with gun violence. Natalie Collada has more.
When it comes to gun violence in Toronto, for some, too much remains unchanged.
I still see the same issues that I was facing as a youth. Growing up in poverty, for me, it was much easier to gain access to a firearm, drugs, rather than landing a job interview.
So far this year, Toronto police data shows there have been 35 shootings. 19 people have been injured or killed, including a 14-year-old girl who on Friday was shot in the head.
We cannot sit and watch the young people dying. And we could prevent it. It's preventable. And I'm seeing the moms who are suffering reoccur trauma.
This week, the federal government announced a plan to invest $250 million over the next 5 years directly into communities. But it's just a start. Youth need to buy in too, says Paisley.
Having them have control of their programming and they building it and decreasing the barriers of catchment areas, or you have to fit a criteria to join my program. I think that is something that holds a lot of youth back.
New regulations also call for tougher border controls. The public safety minister estimates 70 to 80% of the guns police recover in Toronto are smuggled in.
So if we can stop the supply of guns coming into the community, it doesn't solve all the social problems and social conditions that give rise to conflict and violence. But if we can take the instruments of lethality out of the community, we can make it safer. And it's the right thing to do, but it's not the only thing to do.
Toronto's mayor continues to support going further and banning handguns in the city.
I ask myself the question all the time. I keep asking it to myself and to others. Why would anybody living in the city of Toronto need to have a handgun? And I can't think of a single answer as to why they should, other than police officers and very limited exceptions.
But that decision rests with the province, something Premier Ford has previously resisted. Natalie Kalada, CBC News, Toronto.
Mostly cloudy tonight and quite chilly. Currently -8 in downtown Toronto with a snow squall watch in effect. Colette Kennedy joins us now with a look at what's to come. And Colette, snow is on the way, but what it'll look like is different depending on where you are.
Thanks, Kelda. You know, we've got a situation, the setup for Thursday, where one size doesn't fit all, that sort of scenario. One weather forecast does not fit all the areas, even within a pretty small region, because we're going to be seeing some lake effect snow squalls setting up and lake enhancement to some of the snowfall that we'll have on the west end of the lake. So we do have snow squall watches that are in place as this comes in into Thursday. Elsewhere, it'll be lighter in terms of the amounts and more widespread, but later in the day into the afternoon. It's earlier, though, that the squalls will set up. Now, is there another round coming after this one? Yeah, it looks like Sunday night into Monday, we'll see some more snow widespread coming through the province. And temperatures, well, here's one thing. The temperatures near seasonal, so getting a little warmer over the next couple of days, just kind of closer to where they should be. And by the weekend, we're talking about some very mild overnight lows in terms of the temperatures not really dropping off so much. So our temperature trend, as we're kind of looking ahead through the overnight hours, we're getting to some of the coldest air now as we go towards morning and we start to see those winds shifting to the east-northeast and coming in off the lake. Then we'll see sections here over to the west getting a little bit milder towards the morning, just a bit of that enhancement in a different way than what you're going to see in terms of the snowfall. And then into the afternoon, those highs of -3 to -4 in terms of what we'll be looking at. The watch extends from Toronto and think Toronto Island as well in here, all the way over towards Mississauga, Brampton, Halton Hills, and around towards Burlington. And likely you're going to get some of this effect into Hamilton and towards Grimsby as well. You know, with those lake effect squalls, they can just move just a little bit and it changes whiteout conditions in one area and next door, nothing happening. So the morning commute could be a little tricky here as we play this out into 8 a.m. It starts to set up. Very thin band, that begins to expand towards midday and then becoming much more widespread, although lighter in nature as we go into the afternoon, and that continues tracking eastward. And then still some flurries left behind even into Friday with this one, but most of it comes on Thursday. So think when you see Toronto 10 centimeters more towards the west, and locally some areas could be looking at 15 or more. Elsewhere you can see those amounts are lesser in that kind of 4 or 5 centimeter range and around there. Tonight, here you go, Windsor, -10 is going to be that overnight low, feeling like -15. It's better than -22 like last night in terms of the wind chill. Tomorrow afternoon, yes, up to -3 to -5 throughout the area of southwestern Ontario, -4 for Windsor. And overnight tonight, I was showing you kind of how these readings are going to change as we go around the Golden Horseshoe as we come towards the morning, and then tomorrow afternoon in those hours. Do allow some extra time, especially if you're in any of those communities on the west end of the lake, allow some extra time for travel tomorrow and later in the day all around. I said it was getting milder. You see that as the overnight lows start to come up, daytime highs too, by the time that next system comes through, Kelda, into Monday.
All right, thanks so much, Colette.
The weather is brought to you by Trane, the most reliable heating and cooling brand. We test, so it runs. It's hard to stop a train.
After the break, the mystery of the blue dogs in Russia. Now, don't worry, they're perfectly healthy, but what's the reason behind their oddly colored coats? We'll look at that after the break. Finally tonight, dogs with the mysteriously blue-colored fur have been found in the Russian city of Georgetown, about 400 kilometers east of Moscow. The strays were found earlier this month near an abandoned chemical plant in the city. Local veterinarians ran a battery of tests on their condition, but all of it came back normal. Scientists, they are continuing to look for the cause of the oddly colored coats. The Russian city is one of the most polluted in the world and was a key site for chemical manufacturing during the Soviet era. And that is our show for you tonight. Thank you so much for watching. Dwight Drummond has your next local newscast tomorrow at 6. I will see you back here tomorrow night at 11. Have a great night, everyone.